But with all that being said, we'll start with first base. What do you have for number 10?
So at number 10, this might be starting out with a hot take. I feel like you'll probably feel very similar about this guy. But if you showed us this tape 2 years ago and showed us putting this guy, or showed me putting this guy at number 10, I feel like we'd be wondering what happened. But I am putting Vlad Guerrero Jr. as my number 10 first baseman starting. Have not seen 2021 Vlad really in any capacity since that season. He hit 264 last year with a sub 800 OPS. And first percentile infielder in outs above average with minus 13. He's been a very, very subpar base runner with minus 7 BSR. So because of that, his WAR has really suffered. He only had one win above replacement last year, with only a 118 weighted runs created plus, which, for a guy like Vlad Jr., you got to expect more. Um, there's been a lot of concern with the decline in him. I think the biggest one is the power decline. In 2021, he had a 290 isolated power, even with a 311 batting average. Between his slugging percentage and his batting average, it was 290 points. That's excellent. That means he's mixing in a lot of power. It means a lot of his offensive game is related to power. And this year it was only 179. It was 111 points lower from. So with the combination of running and the decline in offense, I feel like we had to bump him down to quite a few spots from where we would have previously had him. But he's still only going into his age 25 season. He still had very good exit velocity numbers last year. He hit the ball hard. He doesn't strike out a lot. He walks a much better amount, or he walks a pretty good amount. He walks about 10% of the time. I believe that upside is still in there, but it's hard to see right now with what we've seen out of him in the last couple of seasons.
Right, right. And I feel like no matter who's putting out the rankings are kind of gonna vary on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know he was number 7 in the MLB top 10 first baseman right now, MLB Network, and then Mike Petriello actually had him number 4, so he expects some big
Yeah.
improvements out of Guerrero.
And I would love to see a breakout next year, but part of me really wonders if we saw the peak of his offense in 2021, and if he's going to be a 130, 135 weighted runs created plus bat, how much can you still value it with his defense and base running being what they are?
Yeah, especially with both of those
Because
kind of
like
taking it. Yeah.
2022 would be kind of a perfect example of that. Those were around his wins above replacement on Fangraphs ended up around like 3.5.
Yeah, right. And yeah, both his base running and defense kind of took a hit last year. So along with the offense, or along with the at the plate offense. Um, so nonetheless, yeah, my number 10 is from the hometown team, making a debut here. He's coming off his rookie season in which he finished, I believe, third in the rookie of the year vote, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I'm talking about Tristan Cassis. And in
AR
his
alum Tristan Casas.
yes, ARR alum Tristan Cassis. Yeah, Daniel interviewed him in the Worcester Red Sox clubhouse in April of 2022, and yeah, Cassis has really improved, or has really had a breakout in his final 55 games of the season last year, which kind of made his rookie of the year case a lot better. And in those final 55 games, he hit 319 with a 1038 OPS. And out of 182 hitters with 200 plus plate appearances in that 55 game span, his slugging ranked 4th and OPS ranked 3rd. And then his expected numbers kind of fell in line there. His expected slugging and expected WOBA ranked 11th out of 187 in that span. And overall, throughout the whole year, not just that 55 game span, he was 85th percentile or higher in chase rate, walk rate, barrel rate, expected slugging, and expected WOBA. So yeah, really optimistic about his offense. Hopefully, just as a Red Sox fan, we see that defense improve. I think his base running wasn't terrible for a first baseman, so I'm not as concerned about that. But I would really like to see that defense improve, whether it's range or just making the plays that he needs to make. But yeah, I have him number 10 on this list. Also, shout out to a guy who was sort of ineligible because Fangraphs put him as a DH for this upcoming year. But Josh Naylor, he was in high consideration for that 10 spot. But then I realized when I went to the Fangraphs roster resource, he's actually a DH. So he is kind of on that around that top 10 level for first baseman. But the Fangraphs has the Guardians with Kyle Manzardo as the first baseman, which is probably it's probably pretty realistic considering the defensive skill that he has as opposed to Josh Naylor. But if Naylor was a first baseman, I would have him. I might have him in this top 10 list, but he is labeled a DH. What do you have for number 9?
So for number 9, I have a guy I think very similar in batted ball profile and overall skill set to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I'm going with a guy that also had a down year in 2022, or in 2023 rather, that we have seen a lot of interesting things out of. It's Vinnie Pasquantino from the Kansas City Royals. I put at number 9. I chose him over Vlad, and it was very close. I think these two are very interchangeable, but throughout the 400 batted, he has an 11.6% strikeout rate and a 10.8% walk rate. And part of me wonders if that's just even still his adjustment to major league pitching, because Vlad Guerrero Jr. had that adjustment period from around 2019 to 20 before he really broke out in 2021. And we haven't seen a full season of Vinnie Pasquantino yet. And I'm really wondering what that could look like. And in 2023, he did have a down year, but his expected batting average was 282. He had a 247 actual. His expected slugging was 454. His actual slugging was 437. So, he actually did not perform quite to the tune of his expected numbers. And his sweet spot rate was 37.8%, which is excellent, far above average. So, he doesn't strike out. He doesn't swing and miss a lot. He has good expected numbers. He hits the ball in the sweet spot. There are a couple things that could be better. His defense and base running are very similar to Vlad Guerrero Jr.'s. But I ended up putting Vinnie Pasquantino in my 9.
Right, yeah, and I'll double down there, and I have Vinnie Pasquantino also as my number 9. And yeah, his on the surface numbers dropped, and even like expected numbers I think dropped a little bit. However, what I looked into was the fact that he suffered an injury in June that sidelined him for the entire rest of the year. It was a shoulder injury, it was a torn labrum, but I don't believe that it was a single event in June that had him sidelined, because he had some days off beforehand where he was trying to like shake off this injury, but it turned out to be something much larger. So I'm wondering when he actually sustained that injury, because there might be a correlation to that and his offensive downturn, because in the first 38 games of his 2023 season, he had a 922 OPS and 91.5 mile per hour average exit velocity. Then in the final 23, that average exit velocity dropped to 85.9 miles per hour, and his OPS was 505 in those final 23 games, as opposed to 922 in the first 38. Also, his expected batting average went from 327 to 211. And in the 110 games preceding that slump, he had an 864 OPS and 140 weighted runs created plus. So I think part of it was just he sustained some sort of injury maybe in May, and that may have been what dropped his offensive performance, because as noted in those stats, like his underlying numbers went down, that average exit velocity went down significantly. So I'm wondering if he just didn't have the power, didn't have just the capable body ability to perform offensively like he was previously, because those previous 110 games of his career, he was a 140 weighted runs created plus guy, which is really, really impressive. So I'm kind of banking on that, being optimistic about that pre-injury stuff, or what I surmise is a pre-injury thing. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about his offense, and he's one of those guys where like better defense and base running would put him higher on this list, but I have him number 9. What do you have for number 8?
Yeah, number 8. This is where I put Tristan Casas. You mentioned his final 55 games of 2023. I went even further and looked at his last 71 games, going back to June 16th. So most of his season, or a good chunk of it, where he hit 311 with a 986 OPS, a 401 on base percentage, 17 home runs, 35 walks. And he was one of the best hitters in the league. You had the stats ready to go, and he ended up despite being really really bad in the first couple of months there, he finished the season with a 129 weighted runs created plus, and a 13% walk rate, which also kind of rose in the last few months there. But yeah, I mean, he hits the ball very well. He had a 370 expected weighted on base average. He had a 500 X slug, which was actually higher than his actual slugging. He averaged over 91 miles per hour in exit velocity. He barreled the ball well. He didn't chase it all, which meant he walked a lot, and he also hit it in the sweet spot a lot. And yeah, the defense and base running, again, kind of an issue. I mean, this is a theme we're going to see with a lot of first basemen, because first base is generally the hardest defensive position to accumulate good defensive statistics. We'll probably point out the one guy that we both have on this list that excels at that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think Casas, Pasquantino, and Vlad are all very similar right now going into 2023, but I really like the upside that Casas showed more recently than the other two, right? Vlad and Pasquantino are both coming off down years. Casas is coming off a 3-month stretch, 4-month stretch in the season where he was one of the best hitters in all of Major League Baseball.
Right, right. And yeah, by the way, Pasquantino was left off the MLB Network top 10 and Cassis was number 10 on that list. So he's getting some love. And yeah, moment of silence for all the people in May who dissed his whole process and him getting walks and maybe his batted ball luck and just dismissing it. So yeah, moment of silence for all of that, all the Tristan Cassis haters out there.
Yeah, we will never forget.
Thank you. Um, so yeah, hopefully that continues in 2023. At number 8 is where, so yeah, we kind of swapped here. My number 8 is where I have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Which yeah, some people might also label that as me underrating him, but yeah, and I have him above where you have him at, so it's kind of a balance there. I think he is due for an offensive bounce back. He was 90th percentile or higher in strikeout rate, average exit velocity, expected WOBA, and expected batting average. So I think he will, sort of figure his way back to like maybe that 130, 140, maybe even 150 OPS plus type hitter. He's not necessarily, based off of those numbers, he's not due to be back to where he was back in 2021, but maybe back in 2022. And along with that, I'm curious what that where his defensive runs saved and outs above average will be at. I'm wondering if that was an outline season or if that's a trend. If that's a trend, that's pretty bad considering he's only 25, but it could just be an outline season where, it just the defensive metrics didn't like him, or he just was playing through something and, couldn't play as good of defense. So yeah, I don't really expect an MVP finalist season out of him, but I could see him at that 2022 level again, where he was, in that 2022 season, I believe he was at a 133 OPS plus. I could see that. I could see an OPS plus around there, or maybe even 140. So yeah, just based off of what I saw last year, I think he'd get there. However, I do think there are 7 first basemen ahead of him for good reason. And what do you have for your number 7?
My number 7, I have a guy with a very big year, a big contract year coming, and his negotiations with his team have been very public. I'm talking about Pete Alonso from the New York Mets. I have him in my number 7. And I mean, it's weird when you look at first baseman because a lot of them kind of feel very similar. Pete Alonso, I would put above the 3 that I've obviously previously mentioned, because he's been such a consistent hitter in that Mets lineup since 2019. And the defense and the base running are what they are. They've been kind of the same throughout his entire career, but he did suffer his lowest weighted runs created plus in a full season this past year. The only year where he had a worse one was 2020, but that was only a 57 game season for him. He did have a 205 BABIP, which I think was a large part of it. so I do expect an offensive resurgence out of him this year. But he did hit, you know, he did drop his sweet spot rate by a couple points this last year. Um, he did drop a couple of his expected numbers from previous years. So I think this past year will be the worst one that we see pre-free agency from him. But I do wonder if we're gonna see like 2019 Pete Alonso again. And to be fair, the juice balls, they were what they were. But maybe even like 2021 Pete or 22 Pete.
Right, right, right. And more consensus from AR here, as Pete Alonso is also my number 7. And yeah, with Pete Alonso can be a complicated conversation depending on who you're talking to. For the novice, I think they really like Pete Alonso. I think that's why he kind of gets overrated sometimes because of the home run numbers, the RBI numbers. He and what I have to say to that is don't get fooled by his 46 home runs last year, because he had the second fewest total bases for a 45 home run season in baseball history. He didn't accumulate the doubles. He didn't get on base via single a whole lot. Like, most of his total bases were from home runs. So if he wasn't, 46 home runs is great. That's awesome. But if you're not getting on base in other ways, and your offense production is mostly through home runs, it brings down your value a little bit. So that's what I have to say to that. And he finished top 10. He finished outside the top 10 in total bases, despite finishing third in home runs. So that's just kind of to break it down for people who think he should be ranked higher because he hits a lot of home runs and is one of the best home run hitters in baseball. Although it has its value, obviously, it's not everything. But on the other side, he is due to improve offensively in those categories that we do care about, like OPS, slugging, all that. He had a 205 BABIP, as you mentioned, and he also had the second unluckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average out of 122. So yeah, I think he could bounce back offensively. He's also one of those guys, defensive base running holds him back a little bit, even comparative to the other first baseman. As you mentioned, also first base is not a position known for its base running and defense. But even with that, comparative to others, he's a little bit down on that. So that's what kind of brings him down the list for me. But yeah, I could definitely see, a 140 OPS plus again, back to that level once again. Which puts him number 7 in my mind. Who do you have number 6?
So at number 6, I went very, very back and forth between my 5 and my 6 and who I wanted to go with. And it was a really tough decision. But for my 6, I decided to go with Christian Walker from the Arizona Diamondbacks, the best defensive first baseman in baseball, outside of maybe Carlos Santana, but that's not important because it's Christian Walker, man. He had a very interesting year where he was, his defense was still solid for the position. He was like marginally negative in terms of defensive runs above average at minus 1.2, which is excellent for a first baseman because they really try to push your value down as a first baseman with those numbers. His base running was also very good. He put up a 120 weighted runs created plus. And I did have a hard time with 4 and 5. The only thing is that he really did outperform his expected numbers quite a bit. His slugging percentage found his way at 497. His expected slugging was at 460. His WOBA was at 351. His expected WOBA was at 339. And that's only a minor difference, but that was only in the case of bringing him to 6 instead of 5, because if you have him at 5, I would not be mad at that. I think there's a completely fair reason. But yeah, best defensive first baseman in baseball, outside of, like I said, maybe Carlos Santana, but he's been doing it consistently and more longer. So I'll still give Christian Walker that title for right now. Yeah, I mean, he has a very unique skill set for the position, still a very good hitter. Obviously got his team to the World Series last year as, one of the longer tenured players on that team. His batted ball data is very good. I would like to see a little more line drives out of him. He only had a 19% line drive rate last year, but that's kind of minor. But yeah, Christian Walker I have in my 6.
Yeah, Walker is very good. He was part of my all underrated team. I also have him number 6. Yeah, he's just like looking at his 2022 and his 2023, very very similar. And that's a good thing. Like they were both pretty good seasons, like both very very good seasons. He had a 125 OPS plus and 14 outs above average in 2022, and then a 123 OPS plus and 11 outs above average in 2023. Also, if you're wondering why, negative defensive runs above average while having a high outs above average, that's because the first base position, like just playing the first base position, brings your value down a little bit because it's just less defensive responsibility, and typically the best defensive players are not playing first base. But among the crowd of first basemen, Christian Walker is the best among them for sure. And that leads to him having the fifth most F4 among first basemen since the start of 2022, which makes it pretty easy to put him in this list. I think the only reason why I don't have him higher is there's another guy who just he's picking up the first base position this year, who already has a tremendous track record. So yeah, Christian Walker number 6, more consensus there. We already have three guys in the same spot. What do you have for your number 5?
My number 5, I wouldn't be surprised if we agree on this one too. This was the guy that I really went back and forth with between he and Christian Walker. It's a guy that used to play on Christian Walker's team, Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt won MVP in the National League in 2022. And there was a bit of batted ball luck on his side, sure, but it actually balanced out this year because there was a lot of misfortune for him in 2023. He had a hard hit rate at 50.8%, and an average exit velocity at 91.3%. Both of those elite numbers at age 35. His expected slugging was 491. He ended up slugging 447. So that's a 50-point difference, or close to a 50-point difference. His walk rate was still in the 89th percentile. His sweet spot rate was still in the 62nd percentile. His chase rate was above average. There are still so many things that Paul Goldschmidt does very well at age 35 going into age 36. And one of them is base running. His BSR was 2.6 last year, which is still very, very good for the position, and also just for a 36-year-old or a 35-year-old, and just in general, it's very good. His defensive runs above average was only minus 8.2, which is very good for first base. And, he still put up 3.7 wins above replacement last year. He could very easily get back to 4 F4 in 2024. Paul there is still a lot left in the tank with him, and he's going to be a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, love that. My number 5, this is where we differ here, and this is where I disrespect your guy maybe a little bit, although maybe I have him ranked higher than some people would, because
you absolutely do.
He is very underrated. I want to see actually accidentally X'd out of the first base rankings, but we'll get
I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, Yandy Diaz, he is one of the best hitters out there, and more people do need to know about that. That's for sure. Just follow Daniel on Twitter. You'll get all the information out of him. But yeah, Yandy Diaz has a 151 OPS plus in the last 2 seasons, and out of 105 hitters with 1,000 plate appearances since the start of 2022, Diaz ranks 8th in OPS plus. That's among all hitters in baseball. And also, last year, he was 95th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, hard hit rate, expected batting average, and expected WOBA. What holds me back here is the defense and base running. He has a negative 10 fielding run value over the past 2 years, and negative 12 base running runs over the last 2 years. That prevents me from putting him higher. I think the other guys in this list, they might not have the exact offensive pedigree, or at least batting pedigree, as Yandy Diaz over the past 2 years, but they have similar numbers to Diaz, but much better defensive and base running metrics. However, it is definitely close, but I have Diaz number 5 here. Do you have him number 4, or do you have him even higher?
I do indeed have Yandy Diaz at number 4. So, you know what? I mean, you might look at it as disrespecting my guy. I think it's perfectly valid. We're only having him separated by 1 spot. Yandy Diaz, to me, is the most underrated hitter in all of baseball. Since the start of 2022, He has a 314 batting average, which ranks third among all qualifiers. He has a 406 OBP, which ranks fourth, a 475 slugging percentage, which ranks 25th, an 881 OPS, which ranks 11th, a 155 weighted runs created plus that ranks 7th, a 13.3% strikeout rate, which ranks 7th, a 12.3% walk rate, which ranks 12th, a 0.93 walk to strikeout ratio, which ranks 5th, a 92.8% average exit velocity that ranks 8th, a 51.6% hard hit rate, which ranks tied for 5th, and a 375 expected WOBA, which ranks 9th. That is all since the start of 2022. I think Yandy Diaz is a top 10 hitter in the game right now. I think there are not 10 hitters that you can confidently say are better than Yandy Diaz. In fact, Chris, do you know how many first basemen had a higher weighted runs created plus than Yandy Diaz in 2023?
Would that be one or two?
It would be 0. He had a higher weighted runs created plus than Freddy Freeman. He had a higher weighted runs created plus than Matt Olson. There's no denying the fact that he is a probably top 3 to 4 offensive first baseman. I have him as the number 4 first baseman entirely. And yes, I do agree the defense and base running are not very good. Even by positional standards, he had a -7 BSR last year, which was very bad. -12.1 defensive runs above average is kind of on par with the rest of first basemen out there. But yeah, he hits the ball very hard. He sprays it very evenly among the field. He's a guy that hits 44.3% of his batted balls straight away, which is very good for a guy that has, has a high ground ball rate, which he does 52%. Reasonable line drive rate at 23%. Power is not exactly his thing to the degree of everything else, but he still did hit 22 home runs last year. He slugged 522, and put up a 932 OPS. And yes, the defense and base running are what they are. But I think Yandy Diaz is the number 4 first baseman. I did put only 3 guys above him. And yeah, he did have a higher OPS or weighted runs created plus than Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson last year.
Yeah, that is quite the feat, especially considering how great of years those two had. And yeah, with referencing the MLB Network list again, Diaz was number 5 on their list. Alonso was number 6, and big discrepancy in where they think Christian Walker is at. They had Christian Walker at number 9, behind Brandon Belt. So
yeah, that was rough. I saw that.
That was not the best. So my number 4 is Paul Goldschmidt. We have him and Diaz flip-flops. And yeah, he's someone where you look at it and it's kind of a complicated conversation because he obviously on the surface had a much worse year offensively, but expected numbers wise, it was actually either the same or better. So like underlying numbers had him almost better as an offensive player. It's just he didn't have tremendous luck like he did in 2022. And yeah, what I'm saying with that is his expected batting average and expected slugging actually improved, and his expected WOBA was in the 91st percentile, and it was the exact same as it was in 2022. And just looking at the longer term sample over the last 2 years, he has a 147 OPS plus, only -1 fielding run value, which basically has him as a neutral first base defender. He has 5 defensive runs saved over those last 2 years, as well as a 49% extra base taken rate and 18 stolen bases in 20 attempts. That 49% extra base taken rate is around 7 percentage points above league average, which is very, very good for a first baseman who's not necessarily known for crazy athleticism. So yeah, I think his underlying numbers suggest that he'll be a little bit better this upcoming year, unless age kind of plays that role. But we haven't really seen any evidence of that yet with his age and whatnot, because he's heading into his age 36 season. So we haven't seen any evidence of that yet. So I can't hold it against him necessarily quite yet. So yeah, now on to number 3.
So at number 3, this is where I put Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper played all of 2020 or not began the 2023 season in May, only a few months post Tommy John. He made the quickest recovery back to the field for a guy that had just gotten Tommy John surgery. And what did he do? He still put up a 900 OPS. He still hit the ball at an average of 91.8 miles per hour. He still put up a 290 expected batting average for a guy with a ironically a 45% ground ball rate, but his batted ball metrics were a lot more interesting this year. He did have a high end ground ball rate, a low end fly ball rate, for at least not a low since 2015. That was actually an okay season for him too, though. But he also did it while learning a new position for the first time. And I think the reason I don't have him 1 or 2 is because I want to see what a full Bryce Harper season at first base looks like. His defense down last year in comparison to where they've been in previous years, but regardless, he is still the hitter that he's been throughout the majority of his career. He's still had a 500 expected slugging, or excuse me, a 530 expected slugging, and only a 500 actual slugging. He still had a 15.2% barrel rate. He still had a 36% sweet spot rate, and he still walked 15% of the time. There is still so much that he is excelling at with in terms of offense. And no matter what he goes through, he still is going to be that guy. I have him as, and yeah, I mean, like I said, first full season at first base this year. I'm interested to see how it goes, but for right now, I do have 2 first basemen above him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I also have Bryce Harper number 3. And MLB Network put him number 2. They put him above Matt Olson, and I kind of understand where they
I
are
kind of
coming
do
from.
too.
But yeah, just to break down Bryce Harper, he's been consistent with his offense when he's been on the field these past 2 seasons. 146 OPS plus in both 2022 and 2023, which obviously very good numbers. And why I say I kind of get where MLB Network is coming from and putting him above Olson is he has been 97th percentile or higher in expected WOBA each of the last 4 seasons. So he has been, his quality of contact as well as strikeout and walk rate have been so solid each of the past 4 seasons to put him 97th percentile or higher. You know, from 2020 or from the 2020 season on. Also, I'm pretty optimistic about his defensive ability. He had 3 outs above average in only 30 games at first base last year. I'm not saying that rate will keep up, but it means that even as at a new position, he was playing positive defense, which is really, really good. And I think those, defensive runs above average numbers, they went down because obviously when you play first base, that value brings it down. And also he played a good bit of DH. So that takes away from your defensive value with the defensive runs above average and defensive wins above replacement. But yeah, I'm optimistic to see, especially for such a good athlete and a guy who I think is heading into only his age 31 season. I think there's good things to come defensively at first base, and he seems like someone who would be very willing to adapt to that position and do his best at that position. And then his offensive excellence speaks for itself. I think me putting Olson above him is less a diss to Harper and more just an appraisal of what Olson has been doing and did last year. So without further ado, who's your number 2 first baseman?
I mean, I don't even think we needed it without further ado, as if there was any sort of shock value to it. I'm putting Matt Olson at number 2. A lot of this list felt like it really wrote itself. I don't know about you, but this one was, I think, the easiest one to make with the least amount of, going back and forth between guys. Yeah, I mean, there was a clear number 1, a clear number 2, and to me, a clear number 3, in that order. But yeah, Matt Olson put up a 160 weighted runs created plus last year, and he put up 54 home runs, the most in Atlanta Braves history by people that judged 2021 Salvador Perez standards. It was the best season in Braves history. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I mean 6.7 wins above replacement as a first baseman with rough defense is pretty outstanding. And it came for good reason, right? A 557 expected slugging. I know that his actual slugging was a lot higher, but having a 604 expected slugging is very difficult and really something that only Aaron Judge does, and that's kind of it. He's actually a very strong base runner for his position. He has 81st percentile base running value, or that's what he put up last year, and he had 1.5 BSR last year. So having positive base running metrics from the position is very good. Especially in his first, his second year with the Braves, really fully acclimating to Atlanta. He hit the ball very hard. He walked a lot. There's so much so many things that he did extraordinarily well offensively. And the 54 home runs, they don't feel like an accident. They really don't. When you see how hard he hit the ball, when you look at his 34% fly ball rate last year, when you look at the fact that he's a left-handed power hitter in Atlanta, it all makes sense. And it feels like something that he could actually replicate next year.
Yeah, 100%. I have Matt Olson number 2 as well. Yeah, last year among National League players, he was first in slugging, second in OPS, and he led the entire MLB in home runs and RBI in 2023. Part of that is credited to a big boost in fly ball rate. You mentioned that very high fly ball rate at 34%. That was a big boost from around 28% back in 2022. Also, his home run to fly ball ratio went up. So I'm curious to see. I'm curious if like some of his expected statistic luck, having the higher slugging than expected slugging and WOBA than expected WOBA, had to do with him like choosing the right areas of the ballpark to hit the ball to. When you're pulling the ball, especially at Truist Park, you're just gonna have better luck in the home run to fly ball ratio standpoint. So I'm curious to see if that'll continue because yeah, I think there's less to be said about expected statistics if you're pulling a lot of home runs because expected stats do not account for what direction of the park you're hitting it into. So if you hit a barrel to center field, it's measured the same as a barrel, down the right field line. That's going to clear the ballpark a lot as opposed to a barrel to center field that, outfielder goes back a few steps and makes the catch. So those two are measured the exact same in expected statistics as kind of the main flaw with it. Although obviously I do like them, but nonetheless, that's why I'm not looking as deep into the expected numbers with Matt Olson, because that's something I did consider with Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper had a better expected metrics than Matt Olson last year. But I think Olson, there's a little bit more to look at there. But also with Matt Olson, he was one of the beneficiaries of the shift rule. He had a 115 average on pulled ground balls in 2021 and 2022, and that boosted to 205 in 2023. And also with Olson, one of the underrated parts of his game is staying on the field. He's only missed 6 games in the last 4 years, and hopefully that continues. So yeah, now on to number 1.
Yeah, I mean, number 1, it's Freddie Freeman. I'm sure he's your number 1 as well. I'd be pretty disappointed if he wasn't. I mean, I don't know. He's a guy that needs no introduction, right? Like, how else are you supposed to talk about Freddie Freeman being number 1 other than he pretty much excels at every single aspect of baseball. He hits the ball very hard. He had a 90 mile per hour average exit velocity last year. He places the ball extremely well. He had a 46.6% sweet spot rate last year, good for 100th percentile. Even going back through the StatCast era, since 2015, he has a 42.8% sweet spot rate, and the lowest one he's ever had in a season is 37.2%, which is still like very, very good. He's going into age 34 right now, and it still feels like he still plays. Doesn't feel like his prime is ending anytime soon. In fact, I feel like he keeps getting better. One thing that he has kept getting better at, specifically since he's joined the Dodgers, has been base running. He's put up back-to-back 5 BSR seasons since he started his tenure in LA. Those are the best BSR seasons he's had throughout his entire career. Whatever base running decisions the Dodgers are having to make or that he's been making in LA, they've been the best of his life. He put up 7.9 wins above replacement last year at the first base position. His defense was like moderately fine enough to where it didn't put him down too far. He still doesn't strike out a lot. He still walks at a good enough amount. He still mixes in power a lot. He had a 235 ISO last year, his highest in a full season since 2019 when the balls were juiced. There is literally, I don't know what else. I feel like I'm just rambling here, but I mean, there's quite literally not a single thing that Freddie Freeman doesn't really excel at. He even stole 23 bases last year, so you can't even really say that.
Yeah, that was actually pretty crazy. Yeah, and by the way, when we're referencing base running runs or BSR, that's just how many runs above or below average above or below league average that you score for your team through base running, and that's measured a lot through obviously stolen bases and the stolen base to caught stealing ratio, as well as extra base taken. So going first to third on singles, first to home on doubles, and second to home on singles. So that's what we're referencing with the lingo. And yeah, I also have Freddie Freeman number one. Yeah, I'm a big Freddie Freeman fan because yeah, I think he should get more credit in the one of the best players in baseball conversation. He's just been that guy for a little bit here, especially the past 2 years. And over the last 2 seasons, he is second among all players in F4, second among all players in batting runs and extra base hits, and he leads the MLB in hits, times on base, doubles, and total bases in the last 2 seasons. He also has 4 outs above average in the span. He was 23 for 24 in stolen bases last year, and he has the most base running runs among first basemen in the last 2 seasons. So he's not only been like the best hitter among first basemen over the last 2 seasons, he's been the best base runner and an above average defender. So yeah, I think not only is he the best first baseman, he's one of the he's like a top 5 player in all of baseball. So yeah, he is that guy. Yeah, you mentioned the great batted ball metrics. He also doesn't strike out typically. He also has a strikeout rate usually around 15, maybe at most like 17%. Yeah, he's an absolute excellent player. Seems like a nice enough dude as well. So yeah, congratulations, Freddie Freeman, number one, just like MLB Network.
Yeah. Do we want to go through our top 10 again?
Yes, it is a lot of consensus here.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think we had the same 10, just like not the same order, but we had the same 10, right?
yes, we did.
Yeah.
What is your 10 through 1?
So my 10th through 1 is Vlad Guerrero Jr. number 10, Vinnie Pasquantino number 9, Tristan Casas number 8, Pete Alonso number 7, Christian Walker number 6, Paul Goldschmidt number 5, Yandy Diaz number 4, Bryce Harper number 3, Matt Olson number 2, and Freddie Freeman number 1.
Yeah, and my number 10 is Tristan Casas, number 9, Vinnie Pasquantino, number 8, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., 7 is Pete Alonso, 6 is Christian Walker, 5 is Yandy Diaz, 4 is Paul Goldschmidt, 3 is Bryce Harper, 2 is Matt Olson, and 1 is Freddie Freeman. So we had I think 6 players in the exact same spots with Pasquantino, Alonso, Walker, Harper, Olson, and Freeman. So yeah, it seems like a fairly easy position to evaluate as opposed to like left field, starting pitcher. Those were some tough ones. And I'm sure we'll have more tough ones upcoming. But yeah, good good first base list.
Yeah.
And yeah, are we ready to move on to the other side of the infield?
Let's do it. This list was a lot harder.